Been spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Been spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Keep spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Keep spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise.
3, 2, 1, roll 5.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Good evening, friends, and welcome to the 13th episode of Crime and Punishment. Lucky 13. This is a legal podcast, not a political podcast. This is, in fact, the official podcast of the Invictus Law Firm, PA, a criminal defense law firm in Orlando, Florida, the website for which is augustusinvictus.com. You can also find us on twitter.com/emperorinvictus. Find us on facebook.com/invictuspa. We are simulcasting this. That is my trusty co-host Tigergen and I. We are simulcasting on YouTube, Periscope, DLive, and Twitch. We have all the links in the description there, so make sure you subscribe to all those. Now, today, we filed suit against the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Orlando Police Department, the City of Orlando, Orange County itself, for what they did last year, setting me up on false charges back in April of last year. You can find that full on twitter.com/emperorinvictus. We're going to talk about that later. But first, I want to bring in Tigergen. We've got some legal news to discuss, not least of which is the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial, which came out the day after the show last week. So we are a little behind the curve, but that's what you get when you have a show once a week, every Monday, and a trial verdict comes out on a Tuesday. So we're going to talk about it today. Tiger, how you doing tonight? What's going on?
I am here, and I am here to own up to my prediction that there was going to be a full acquittal.
Instead, why don't we, for the people who weren't here, why don't we go into why you would think that anyone would acquit Derek Chauvin? Let's start with how you came to that conclusion to begin with.
All right, so first, before even getting into the actual evidence in the trial itself, the reason why I was predicting a full acquittal, there were three main reasons. One is, typically in any other trial where a police officer is on trial, they get off. That's the rule. Juries love police officers. The other reason was that there was informal polling going on, a lot of polls during the trial that said that it was shown people were initially, before the trial, they were thinking that Chauvin was guilty, and then as they watched the trial, they switched their opinion to innocent. And the numbers were something like 75% of people switched from guilty to innocent just watching the trial. So you would think that's how the jurors would feel. And then the third reason was the evidence itself. I feel like the prosecution actually did a poor job. They were switching their theory of death about midway through, or maybe not, but initially they were bringing in the bystanders. The bystanders were talking about blood chokes and the knee on the neck. And then when the medical experts came in, then all of them were talking about it was positional asphyxiation that killed George Floyd. In other words, no matter how Chauvin held down George Floyd, just because he was in the prone position, he died. That was the entire reason. Prone position kills. So,
being that he's laying down. Right?
Yes, laying down on his stomach.
Okay. So what would be the difference who's laying down on his back? Either way, you're prone, right? Are they saying that he had to be laying on his stomach in order to die?
Yeah, they were saying, so even before the Chauvin trial, there's controversy about police officers pinning somebody down flat on their stomach. They've been saying that kills because the person, their chest can't move, so they can't breathe. But in the past few years, as defense was bringing in and other court watchers were talking about, there's been plenty of tests showing no, people can breathe just fine when they're flat on their stomach, and even with weight on their back, they're just fine. Those tests were done even before this trial, and so but that was their theory. Their theory wasn't even knee on neck. The prosecution's theory was not knee on neck. It was positional asphyxiation.
Well, in bigger news, Zendaya scores the biggest wow moment on the Oscars red carpet.
Wow.
Exactly.
I don't know.
So you predicted that he was going to win because everybody watching the trial said, oh, okay, so he wasn't guilty. So his knee wasn't on his neck. So all this evidence is coming out and the defense is poking all these holes in it. So you thought, well, if everybody else can see it, then certainly the jury sees it.
Yeah, I mean, even the court TV commentators, I mean, they were blatantly biased. About once Nelson was cross-examining the use of force experts, like even they were almost starting to turn defense, Eric Nelson, into like a hero. They were putting up little mini biographies of him on their channel. They were genuinely impressed with how good of a job he was doing, just turning the prosecution's own witnesses into defense witnesses. In some cases, literally, he subpoenaed one of the prosecution's witnesses to come back and testify for him. So, I mean, that was all. That was all. But the biggest reason really was those polls, and we've seen this before with the Zimmerman trial and what was it, Eric Brown or in Ferguson, those riots. Like the police officers kept getting off in even those big major trials. And I've heard Attorney Andrew Branca, he put out a lot of commentary on this trial. He was saying that this is I'm going to try not be political here. I don't know how else to say this, but this is the left or establishment's new way of running these cop kills black person trials. They've figured out what they did wrong in these Ferguson trials and in the George Zimmerman trials, and now they just blew it out of the park this time.
So what did they do wrong in those trials?
I think one of the big things is they found out that prosecutors are lousy attorneys. They are trying cases on easy mode. Typically, a prosecutor, all they do is...
So you're saying they figured that out, and that's why they hired those, 14 private lawyers to come in as contractors to prosecute Derek Chauvin.
Yes.
Yeah, that's unheard of.
The two trial attorneys that were always on screen for the prosecution, it came out they were pro bono. They volunteered to do this.
I'm sure they did. But here's my retort to people who think that, well, this is clearly unjust, which I can't disagree with. It is unjust that you would hire a team of 14 lawyers to come in and prosecute a man, right? for doing his job. You can't prove the case yourself, so you're going to try every angle in the world to make sure that this guy goes to jail, whether he did something or not. Yeah, that's unjust, but for the people who are upset about it, think about it this way. How many trials did Derek Chauvin attend with all of his buddies trying to put someone in jail on false charges? How many trials have those cops in that town gone to where they lied on the stand under oath just to put somebody away? How many times did they do this before it was done to them? I agree it's unjust. But as Malcolm X would say, as a farm boy, chickens coming home to roost never made me sad. In fact, it made me glad. Remember all those fucking... oh, boy. First profanity on this family show. All those people who were supporting the police, thin blue line, wearing their stupid American flags with the blue line on it. Remember those guys at all these rallies, and the cops turned on them, and these guys were all put in jail. I remember that vividly. And now, this same system is turned on them. I don't know, man. I have a completely different view of this trial than most people, including you, Tiger. I think we might be at odds on this one.
I'm more concerned about the manner that it was conducted. Derek Chauvin, or police officer going to jail, it says Jesus said, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's how I see it. If your career is ending people's lives, don't be surprised when it comes back to you.
Yeah. Well, you were saying the left had made big mistakes in the Trayvon Martin case and in other cases where the cops walked, right? And one of them was, don't rely on the prosecutor alone. So they bring in this team of outside lawyers to make sure that he's convicted no matter the cost. What were some of the other mistakes in those former trials where the cops walked that they fixed?
Yeah, I wasn't watching those trials. I hate to be that way. I wasn't watching those trials too closely back then. That was before I was in law. I really only knew what the newspapers were saying back then, and the commentary that I've been watching on this trial, they didn't shed too much light on what was going on back then. I can tell you, I know that there was a lot of tricks pulled in the Trayvon Martin case. I learned that from the documentary about the trial, where they literally put on a fake witness. So
interesting. Well, I'd say one of the most notable things is the escalation of violence. I don't recall the jurors in the Trayvon Martin case fearing for their lives or thinking, we're not going to be able to make it to the courthouse if these protests continue. Like, we're going to get hit with soup cans and bricks if we go to jury service. Like, you saw the article with the alternate juror who said, she feared. Where was it? Chauvin trial juror says she feared intimidation at her home and riots if the verdict wasn't accepted. I guess it's not an alternate juror. That was an actual juror.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. I was seeing an interview with an alternate juror come out, and maybe.
No, did you want to be a juror? And Christensen says, I had mixed feelings. There was a question on the questionnaire about it, and I put, I did not know. The reason at that time was I did not know what the outcome was going to be, so I felt like either way you were going to disappoint one group or the other. I did not want to go through rioting and destruction again, and I was concerned about people coming to my house if they were not happy with the verdict. That sounds like an appeal to me, right there.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that they're going to riot and destroy Minneapolis all over again if we don't come out with the right verdict. I don't know. Seems like she was influenced, if you asked me, by riots that were, like I said, there was an escalation of violence. There was no degree. I mean, the degrees of magnitude between the Trayvon Martin case and this case. Even the media manipulation was just wild. I remember last week I was watching I forget, but one of these big, CNN or CBS or whatever they were, come out, and the was asking her, what the effect of the verdict is going to be. That was all they cared about. Nobody cared about whether he was guilty or innocent, and that was telling. That was telling that all the media cared about was what is the effect of the verdict going to be. Not, well, is he actually guilty or innocent, or, what would they be basing this decision on, the jury that is. It was who's going to be happy with this verdict and who is not going to be happy. And the commentator, who you would think is trained in law, who's giving commentary on the legal process here, you would think that they're going to talk about exactly that, but they don't. The woman was saying, well, no, I don't think that... that's what they were talking about. They were talking about split decisions, right? Well, he could be found guilty of this and not guilty of that. They could find a lesser included charge he's guilty of, and he's not guilty of murder. And the question wasn't, well, what was the evidence supporting this and what would a likely verdict be? The question was, how is this verdict going to affect people? And the woman was saying, no, I don't think that a split decision would be satisfying to most people. That verbiage is just incredible. I don't think it would be satisfying to most people, a split verdict. He has to be convicted on everything, otherwise the mob will not be satisfied. Incredible. And then, literally, 2 minutes later, they came back with the verdict.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And I mean, that's what bugs me is that a trial should be an objective look at what's going on. I mean, I know, the attorneys, they're biased, they're trying to make the jury their own team and everything, but the jury, when they're watching it, it really should be as detached and objective as possible. And I know that's not realistic. Most people, if you study persuasion, negotiation at all, you understand emotion affects decision making. And even our favorite attorney, Jerry Spence, he makes a big deal about manipulating via emotion during a trial. But it really should, people, even when they go in there, they really should just be, look at what does the evidence say. And when you're reading that interview with this juror, she's saying things like, oh, the defense didn't deliver what they promised in opening statement. It's like, what? The defense, they literally showed the knee not on the neck. They showed the pills prosecution showed the pills in the vehicle and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, I don't know, did she sleep through the trial?
Yeah, well, I saw some commentary. All right, so first of all, we got two different things going on here. I saw, first of all, commentary about how the verdict being that fast, it was clear that they decided this before opening arguments was over. It was already a done deal. The trial was pro forma. Second of all, everybody is saying that you are echoing. So I turned off one of the... All right, so you're working now, Tiger. Sorry about that. You've apparently been on echo this whole time because of one of the broadcasting audio inputs here. You've been on double, so I fixed that.
Awesome.
All right, stream is a bit laggy. Yeah, I don't know what to do about that. There's not much to do about that. But all right, so you were wrong about the verdict.
Yes.
So now we've got post-conviction relief, right? We've got appeals to do. The judge actually weighed in on this, saying that there might be an appeal. The judge dismissed the motions for mistrial. Are you aware of any motions for new trial that have been filed? Do they do that in Minnesota?
No, not that I've seen. I haven't seen anything announced.
All right. Yeah, I'm not clear on whether they filed motions for new trial, whether they filed the notice of appeal. I'm not sure what they've done. But one
Well,
thing...
to write, it's going to take a while. There's a lot of good reasons to appeal this.
Right, but on the notice of appeal, you don't have to say why you're appealing. You just say, we're appealing. And so I don't know. Well, I mean, in Florida, you have 10 days to say, to file your motion for new trial. Maybe they've got a few days left, and that's what they're waiting on. They're just making a bang-up motion for new trial. So we might have that to talk about next week, if that motion comes out. But one of the things, the motion to declare a mistrial after Congresswoman Waters called for violent rioters to get, quote-unquote, more confrontational, if they didn't come up with the right verdict, I don't think you can appeal that. I mean, it was on the record, sure, but you can't really prove that it affected the jury. Are you aware, did they question the jury and say, did you hear this news? Were you affected by this? I mean, they couldn't do it after the verdict, right?
No, they didn't. The jury was not questioned about it at all.
Yeah, I don't know how you would appeal that then. I guess you could say they should have been questioned about it, but then if you question about it, then you're informing them.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. They're saying that that for all of these different influence things, the jury was not questioned about, and that's appealable by itself. I don't know that area of law, but that's what I'm hearing.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens this week. Whether they file the new trial, they file the notice of appeal. I guess we'll find out. My son is asking in here, I lost it. Didn't you say that we should protect the Constitution no matter the violation because those violations might just be turned against you? Yes, I did say that. I've been called out by my own son. Yeah, I did say that. It is very true. I'm just, I take it personally, what has happened to me and my family, and the cops setting me up, and everything they've done. Speaking of which, let's post that link in here. I never did post that link. So for those of you who are late to the show, today we sued the agents of the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Orlando Police Department for malicious prosecution, malicious custodial interference for interfering with my custody dispute, abuse of process, false imprisonment, everything. We sued today. So we're going to talk about that, but I wanted to find the link here on Twitter. I posted the whole lawsuit to Twitter today, so you can see it yourselves. But you're right, son. We should all be upset that Derek Chauvin was railroaded, no matter the fact that all his friends have railroaded so many people all across the country. We shouldn't be gloating about the fact that the chickens have come home to roost. Maybe what we can say, to be fair, is that maybe now the cops will take their heads out of their rear ends and they will think to themselves, maybe we shouldn't be railroading people now that it can clearly be turned against us. Maybe we shouldn't be doing the bidding of these people in power who have been turning us on the citizens of this country. Maybe we should think about utilizing that discretion we've been giving when we are given these badges. Maybe we should think about how we implement justice, how we investigate crimes instead of just going on something somebody says to set them up on false charges and incarcerate them for no reason. Maybe we should think about that. Maybe we should think about twisting evidence. Maybe we should think about, putting on false testimony that we know to be false. Maybe we should think about the effects of paying off expert witnesses who then have a stake in the matter and who are presenting testimony that is dubious, just so we can get a conviction. Maybe cops will start thinking about that now. One can only hope, my son says.
Yeah, maybe you can answer this. Something I've always wondered is, why do cops care about arresting people so much, convicting them so much? A bunch of nobodies, like these
I do
drug
know.
heads in my city. Why do they care that so much that they fabricate evidence and such just to put some nobody drug addict in jail? Do they get incentive bonuses for number of arrests? Like, what's the big deal?
I do happen to know the answer to this. I'm glad you asked. When I was in jail, I was jailed with a former cop. And we had conversations about this stuff. And he would tell me, I thought back then that I was doing the right thing. I thought that when these people would come in with their accusations, that, why would they lie? I tried to get both sides of the story. And now I look back, because I see what happened to me, and now I look back and question all of these people that I brought here to this jail, this very jail. And I think, what did I do? And it turns out one of the stories he was telling me is about a place he worked, which I'm not going to say because nobody needs to know which jail this was or who this person was. But I will say he was telling me about the policy of this certain law enforcement agency. And it's the supervisors who will get on these cops and they'll say, why haven't you made more arrests? You need to be arresting more people. That actually happens. And it's, a kind of an urban legend that there are quotas where you have to have 100 arrests per, quarter or whatever it is. Maybe they don't have those specific numbers that they're giving to people, but you do have supervisors in law enforcement agencies breathing down their necks saying you need to be making more arrests. You can't just be letting people go. This is policy. And I remember when I was a young lawyer, and I did a deposition one day, well, a series of depositions. I brought in every cop there was in this case, right? I sat them all down, asked them what happened. I left the supervisor for last. And I was asking these guys, one specifically, the guy who did the traffic stop, 'cause this was a drug case, right? And this traffic stop got out of hand. And the question is, what were you doing pulling him over in the first place? What did he do? Well, he didn't use a turn signal. Well, in Florida, that's not illegal. You don't have to use a turn signal. At least at that time, you didn't. I don't know. I haven't looked it up lately. But at that time, you did not have to use a turn signal to change lanes. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, policy of the Orlando Police Department is to make contact with as many individuals as possible in this high crime area. So the point is not to pull him over and give him a ticket for not using his turn signal. The point is to pull him over and just make contact. Just talk to him. And then you can determine, does this guy act suspicious? Does this guy make furtive movements to conceal something? Is this guy high? Is he driving drunk? Who knows? It could be anything. But the point is, you're not going to know if you, as an officer, do not make contact. So they might not have quotas. Maybe they don't. But the policy of these various law enforcement agencies, it's the same. Make as much contact, make as many arrests as you can. You have to be out there doing your job, justifying the budget that is given to your law enforcement agency. So that is one of the many reasons why cops care, to answer your question, Tiger. That is why they care, because they have supervisors breathing down their necks about you need to make more arrests. They also care because think of any job. Think of being a baker, Why do you care what it looks like when the cake comes out of the oven? Well, you care because it's your work. It's your job. And if it doesn't look good, then you don't look good. All right, so cops, they have to care. They arrest somebody. It doesn't look good on them when their case gets dismissed. They look incompetent. It looks bad when you get to trial and a defense attorney shows how you did not do your job right. I had one case where I felt bad for the cop. Like, I was cross-examining him, and at one point he was so defeated he hung his head and admitted that he had not done something. And like for a second I felt pity for him, because he felt so bad about being exposed at not doing his job properly. And I'm like, dude, why didn't you just let this go? I mean, obviously I didn't say that in the trial, but I'm thinking like his concern was for his professional standing. His concern was for how the community and the jury and the judge and the prosecutor, how all these people saw him. His concern was never, did this guy actually commit a crime? Did I arrest a person for not committing a crime? He never thought about that. All he thought about was his standing, and that is why, Tiger, these guys care so much about it. It's not about the person, it's about them looking bad.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you were talking about the supervisors breathing down their neck. I would imagine being a police officer, you would actually, if you could help it, you would probably just want to sit by the road, watch the cars go by, not bother pulling anyone over, because, hey, it is possible. You could get shot. You don't want to get in anybody's face today because you had a bad home life earlier the day. So I can imagine that. Like, there's a lot of guys. Sure, plenty of police officers are adrenaline junkies. They love to get into fights if they can. But there's also got to be plenty that are just like, I don't really want to do anything today. I certainly don't want to risk getting shot. And so they would have to have some supervisors saying like, hey, you need to, at the very least, make contact with a bunch of people today.
Yeah, but things are changing. Things are changing. It used to be that there were a lot of cops who were just, dude, when I was a kid, I got pulled over so many times. I mean, doing outrageous things like, going 70 in a 35, like just stupid things, right? And back then, even in Orlando, which the city has completely changed over the past 20 years, but even in Orlando, I'd get pulled over and they'd say, look, just get out of here. Just go, just cut it out, all right? Back then, you could do that. Now, you get pulled over in Orlando, you've got a militarized police force with 20 people responding to the scene, and they're looking for drugs, bringing the dogs. It's a whole spectacle. It's unheard of now, and with so many police being militarized, it's a different story. I remember one kid, it was actually my first trial ever out of law school, and the cop got up there, and he was talking about this neighborhood, Pine Hills, which is famously a bad neighborhood in Orlando. I mean, like, possibly the worst, but definitely top 5 worst neighborhoods in Orlando. And he was up there talking about how he had done 3 tours in Pine Hills, as though it were Afghanistan. And that was my first trial ever. That was what clued me in to what was going on here. The police go through these neighborhoods acting like they're not a police force, they are a militarized invader.
Well, have you ever... I know you used to talk about taking a Navy SEAL test. Were you ever in the military?
Yes, I was.
Okay, yeah, so you're probably familiar with how, especially in the reserves component, lots of police are soldiers, lots of soldiers are police. Like, the police force is like about the only non-military job you can have as a reservist that's very forgiving of you going out on training exercises and deployments for the military. It's that and jail guard. So right. There's a lot of crossover between the two.
Yeah, well, especially now. I mean, they come home from the wars, and what are you going to do? You're going to go on the SWAT team. You're going to go into private contracting. You're going to, go into the police force. Like, these are natural places for you to go now, especially with the Pentagon's weapons programs, the training that the FBI is doing for all local and state law enforcement all across the country to make it more uniform. Dude, what else? It's natural. Like, I was a philosophy major. What are you going to do with a philosophy degree? You're going to get a PhD in philosophy, or you're going to go to law school. Like those are your two things. So you come out of the military, being a cop doesn't look so bad. Way easier to police docile Americans who think everything is okay than it is to police, Afghanis who are trying to murder you because you've invaded their country. Completely different scenario, but you have the same expectations of policing, if that's what we're calling it when you invade some territory. And it pays well, good hours. You don't get shot at most of the time. 99% of the time, you're not getting shot at. It's one of the safest jobs in the country. So why not? We've got about 20 minutes left. So we never did get to the other news. Let me just go through the introduction of this lawsuit. And let me, again, put the link in here for everybody who's late to the show. We're talking about the lawsuit that was filed today. We've been putting it off the entire show because we've been talking about the Chauvin trial. Let me just read the introduction. It's a few pages. And then maybe we'll have questions from the audience, or maybe we'll run out of time and have to play the outro. I don't know. This is an action for malicious prosecution, violation of due process, false imprisonment, abuse of process, malicious custodial interference, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to commit these acts, conspiracy to conceal these acts, negligent supervision, failure to intervene, and respondeat superior. Said torts were committed in a malicious bid to salvage a fraudulent domestic violence case against plaintiff in York County, South Carolina, and to prevent plaintiff, who is a criminal defense attorney, from assisting his father, who was the target of an operation by a task force of the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation. Defendants Sergeant Bradley Bakeman, Detective Matthew Beach, Corporal Jillian Berry, Corporal Freddie Maestri, and Deputy Nicholas Wacker exploited a known custody dispute to use plaintiff's wife to these nefarious ends. On 20 April 2020, Defendant Sergeant Bradley Bakeman, an agent of the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation and sergeant with the Orlando Police Department, contacted plaintiff's wife, with whom plaintiff was in an ongoing custody dispute fully known to Defendant Bakeman, to falsely allege that plaintiff was stalking her. As intended by Defendant Sergeant Bradley Bakeman, plaintiff's wife then falsely alleged to the defendant Deputy Nicholas Wacker of the Orange County Sheriff's Office that plaintiff was harassing and intimidating her in violation of 2 South Carolina injunctions. Plaintiff's wife, who was deliberately set in motion by Defendant Sergeant Bradley Bakeman, was assisted in framing the charges against plaintiff by Defendant Detective Matthew Beach of the Rock Hill Police Department in York County, South Carolina, who, through telephonic communication, helped plaintiff's wife to convince Defendant Deputy Nicholas Wacker of the Orange County Sheriff's Office to pursue false criminal allegations. Defendant Sergeant Bradley Bakeman, Deputy Nicholas Wacker, Corporal Jillian Berry, and Corporal Freddie Maestri, who framed the charges against plaintiff and sought his arrest, knew or should have known that the allegations were demonstrably false, but had plaintiff arrested anyway. As a result of defendant's actions, plaintiff remained incarcerated for over 4 months. The information contained in the affidavits by plaintiff's wife was not true, and, upon investigation by the Assistant State Attorney, the case was dismissed. That, for everybody who saw the news last April, that is what happened. That is how that circus came to be. In a short 8 paragraphs. Then the lawsuit goes into how the Orange County Sheriff's Office covered it up. After the case was dismissed and everybody knew what had happened, then they started covering it up. Because I went in and I pressed charges and I filed what we call professional standards at Orange County Sheriff's Office, but what's basically internal affairs. I filed those complaints and they covered it up. So that is the next several paragraphs about how that came to be. And then we go into all the technical legal jargon. So that, in a nutshell, is the lawsuit that we're talking about. I really don't want to get into the details. I've debated that back and forth, but the lawsuit, it speaks for itself. All the facts are in there. The legal arguments are in there. And if anyone wondered what had happened last year and how I got arrested a second time, now you know. Now you know. So, that's that news. What other, you were talking about a Supreme Court opinion. Now, was this a petition or was it an actual opinion that came out?
An opinion that came out.
Oh, okay. All right. Were you able to find the article on that? Because I was not.
Yes, I was, and
All
I
right.
believe I sent it to you on Telegram. Yeah, there it is.
On Telegram? All right. Well, you go ahead and let us know what happened. I am going to boomer my way into my Telegram account.
Okay, let me get in front of me. So, all right. I have way too many things up here, but it's a juvenile law case, and what the justices found was, here it is, court upholds life without parole sentence for Mississippi man convicted as a juvenile. So, one of the big things in... All right, so first have to describe juvenile law about this case, and they apparently have no idea what juvenile law is. Juvenile courts are something very new and unique in the world. For thousands of years, we never had juvenile courts. If you committed a crime as a child, you were typically tried the same as an adult. That changed in, I believe it was close to the turn of the 20th century in the United States, where we opened up our first juvenile court in one of our major cities. And a juvenile court is not a criminal court. Nothing, if a juvenile gets arrested, he's not actually arrested. They have, let me see, violate, let me put it all up here, because they have their own lingo for everything. So disposition means sentencing. Delinquency means violating criminal law that applies to both juveniles and adults. Status offense is violating law that only applies to juveniles. So it's also important to know that every state in America, they have their own set of body of laws that apply only to them. So there's a lot of differences right there. Now, the United States Supreme Court, back in 1996, the Supreme Court in Roper v. Simmons, they ruled that a juvenile cannot be given the death penalty. Just flat out, no matter what. They can't be given the death penalty. And Justice Scalia, he just completely tore into that majority opinion, saying his main beef with it was that the majority opinion was not making a legal argument in the least. Rather, the United States Supreme Court at the time, in the majority, was saying, times have changed, we're no longer going to execute juveniles. And Scalia's just like, that's not law. And there isn't even a national consensus on it, unlike what the majority opinion was saying. It was trying to say there was a national consensus. There wasn't. Only at the time, 18 states had banned executing juveniles. And you see this type of language come up in the dissent for this current opinion where they uphold life without parole for juveniles, where, I believe it was Sotomayor was talking again about national consensus, times have changed, things like that. So
was Sotomayor one of the majority?
What's that?
Was Sotomayor one of the majority in this case?
No, she was in the dissent.
Oh, okay. Yes,
she
that
was
makes
in
sense.
The dissent. And again, this was another one of the things I wanted to bring up, is that for whatever reason, we again got a near equal ideological split on the court between supposed right and supposed left. And one of the things I learned when I was studying juvenile law is that for whatever reason, the left, they don't like punishing children at all. And the only thing I can figure is that just goes, there's a segment of the population, typically the leftists, who just believe in life without consequences. and
That is a political statement.
Consequences for actions. They hate it. They just want to do away with that. And let me see if I could get here.
It looks to me like this is not so much about do we want them punished or not. It looks like a technical decision.
Yes.
Where there was a question of, do you need a separate finding saying that the juvenile is incapable of being rehabilitated? Or can you just sentence them to life without that separate finding? So the majority is saying, yeah, you don't need a separate decision. You don't need to specifically find that they can't be rehabilitated. You can go ahead and sentence them to life. And it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the case where the kid killed his grandfather. Is that right? Okay. So, yeah, they're saying, no, you don't have to specifically find that he can't be rehabilitated. Sending him to prison for life for killing his grandfather is perfectly reasonable. That's what I'm getting. But I also have not read the opinion, so you correct me if I'm wrong.
I did not get a chance to read the opinion. I just have this SCOTUS blog opinion in front.
Same. So
what interests me is more the broad questions of juvenile law and things like that. And I think it's shown right here where you have, like you said, it's a technical decision. I personally think that Justice Kavanaugh is generally great with these kind of things. He tends, I feel like he's a bit more objective. I know the chat's probably screaming at me about it now, and any listeners, but I like him. I think he's a bit more legal-minded than most justices. And the dissent, at least according to what's quoted in this blog article, it just looks like ideological decision-making that just, hey, you didn't rule what we wanted.
Well, maybe we should pack the courts. Just kidding. I don't know why anyone would think that packing the courts wouldn't make it more political. It's already ultra political.
Yeah.
So you were telling me about don't believe it when Newsweek says that Democrats' court packing plan dead on arrival because Nancy Pelosi won't consider it. You're telling me don't believe that. Nancy Pelosi is not just going to consider packing the court, she's going to do it.
Yeah, so I do want to kind of counter some of that commentary. Well, not counter it, but just kind of, because you don't know. You don't know what she's thinking. I, in spite of what people think, politicians are human beings, and maybe Nancy Pelosi is a Democrat who's just like, no, that's a crazy idea to pack the courts. It'll slow down decision making. It'll be cumbersome. It can cause problems. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know her. Maybe in this article, it looks like she is. What the commentators on the right are saying is that she is simply not making a decision on it right now, on that committee that Joe Biden set up that we were talking about last week. She wants to hear that the committee see what they have to say, and then when they have like their studies or whatever to say, oh, court packing is great, then she'll support it later. Maybe. I don't know.
So where is the committee at right now? Anybody know?
I don't think anybody knows. Because I have not seen anything about it other than that.
Yeah. A lot of committees out there right now. Who knows what's going on anywhere anymore? Speaking of which, I don't know if you heard the bigger news, even bigger than Zendaya at the Oscars, wowing everybody. Did you hear that Caitlyn Jenner is running for governor of California?
No, I have not.
Yep. That is what's going on. So, well, what other news do we have today? Oh, there was somebody up here. I meant to respond to this in the comments. Sorry. Dr. Austify News, if I'm reading your name correctly. He was saying we should do an episode on Ezra Pound and the people who were convicted of treason after World War II on trial. I've studied everything about Ezra Pound. He's hands down one of the top 5 writers in my life. So we should do that. And we should do some Carl Schmitt episodes. Yeah, we've been doing topical shows for a while now. We should do some more intellectual stuff soon. Well, let's do a book soon. We did do Jerry Spence's book, but I guess that's pretty topical too. Just old news.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant in a few other shows where I guess we have a different definition of topical. I was thinking, when I was saying more topical, I was saying exactly more of this intellectual, philosophical stuff because I feel like that is largely absent from legal reasoning. I think it does need to go back to more of its roots, so to speak. Did you see, going back to news though, some huge news dropped today, and I only saw it a few minutes before we went live. I dropped in your telegram. Lawyer for Ashley Babbitt's family announces civil action will be filed.
Yeah.
That is...
Let me bring that up. So, where is that lawyer? What state is he in?
I would love to know. I mean, I had trouble just finding articles on this, but at the very least, I'm sure
this isn't all over the news? This isn't the number one story?
The right newspapers, the right-wing newspapers, like when I did the search for it, I didn't see anything by any left-wing paper, and it looks like all he did was make an appearance on Newsmax, and so these right-wing papers are just quoting what he was saying in that video, which I did watch that interview. It was just 4 minutes.
Well, it looks like he's saying that because the Justice Department, as we already knew, Justice Department cleared the law enforcement officer. Did anybody ever find out who this law enforcement officer was? Last I checked, they never released the guy's name. They refused to say who he was.
So what I'm seeing, before, the internet was doing a lot of their web sleuthing on it, and they believe they identified the man. It looks like a good ID to me. I don't know. But the Capitol Hill police, they've recently came out and said, no, it's not that guy. You're completely wrong. And I guess it's just some other police officer with, I don't know. But this attorney, he seems to believe the web sleuths, because in the interview he was saying that it looks that that Capitol Hill police officer had like political animus against right-wing Trumpers. So, and the web sleuths, they were bringing up this guy's social media and all of his comments and anti-Trump stuff and all that. So...
Well, it's amazing that the Department of Justice throws this case out without ever naming the guy. Because the Department of Justice famously makes press releases every time they make an arrest or every time they investigate anything. It's all over the news. They can't help themselves.
Yeah.
Ever since the days of J. Edgar Hoover, they put it all over the place. And for them to... I don't want to say cover it up, but what else do you call it?
Yeah.
When nobody can examine.
Well, her attorney, well, not her attorney, I don't know, but this attorney, he was saying he believes it's entirely political. Everything about it, the case about them dropping it, not investigating, and all that. He said, if the circumstances were the other way politically, it'd just be all over the news. And so, yeah.
Well, I am trying to find the DOJ press release on this because it's quoted in a different article. I haven't seen the original press release, but the quotation just says the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia's Public Corruption and Civil Rights Section and the Civil Rights Division with the Metropolitan Police Department's Internal Affairs Division conducted a thorough investigation of Miss Babbitt's shooting. Okay. And then officials examined video footage posted on social media, statements from the officer involved, whom they do not name, and other officers and witnesses to the events, physical evidence from the scene of the shooting, and the results of an autopsy. Based on that investigation, officials determined that there is insufficient evidence to support a criminal prosecution. Officials from IAD informed a representative of Ms. Babbitt's family today of this determination. Yeah. So maybe they conducted an investigation, maybe they didn't, but I guess good luck trying to file a lawsuit on a guy who, you're guessing to begin with. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things I was gonna say. I mean, this is one of those instances that I think really does need a trial. I think there needs to be some evidence brought before people to see what was going on and rule one way or the other, reward who needs rewarded, things like that. I don't like that it's web sleuths trying to ID this guy. Just say the guy's name, especially if you did your investigation, said that it was a justified shooting. Just say, that's who this guy is. He did everything right. Here's why he did everything right. But
right. Well, ideally. Well, all right. So we've reached the end of the out. We're actually a little over time. You got any parting thoughts for the evening, Tiger?
No. Let's save it all for next week.
Yeah, we got some things to look into for next week. For everybody else out there, stay in school. Don't do drugs. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Take a look at my life and realize nothing left. 'Cause I've been blasting and laughing so long that everyone thinks my mind just got didn't deserve it. To be treated like a punk, that's unheard of. You better watch how you're talking and the way you're walking, 'cause this life alone will leave you lined in chalk. Been spending most of life living in the gangster's paradise. Been spending most of life living in the gangster's paradise. Get the situation that got me facing. I can't live a normal life. I was raised by the stripes, so I gotta be down with the hood team. Television watching got me chasing. Death ain't nothing but a heartbeat away. I'm living life to a die. What can I say?